Perez, man, thank you so much for being here.
Hello, happy to be here.
So, for those of you, and unfortunately I can't hear Perez right now, so hopefully in the control room they'll figure that out. Perez Hilton is the most prominent blogger in Hollywood history. Yeah, he doesn't need an introduction, but I'll give him one anyway. He was one of the first bloggers, period. Certainly the biggest one out here in La La Land. Now Hollywood is crumbling grope by grope, and we are lucky to have the number one expert on behind the scenes machinations. Perez, my first question: is this the end for Hollywood?
I definitely don't think that everything that's happened as the result of this Harvey Weinstein scandal will very negatively impact Hollywood. Hollywood is a very forgiving town. I don't think that he will be able to have a comeback. What I do think will happen as a result of this is we, as a world and a community here in Los Angeles, are now creating a culture where we're letting women know that it is okay for them to speak out, that they will be supported, that they will be heard, understood, and believed.
Do you think, though? I mean, it's obviously people are pouring out. There's this bandwagon now that Harvey Weinstein has been exposed. Formerly the biggest guy in town, now he's being run out on a rail. But is it just a bandwagon? I mean, I notice people aren't naming a whole lot of other names right now. Does that culture where you're afraid of saying the wrong thing about the powerful people, does that still persist? Does this, it's not even a casting couch, it's like way sleazier than a casting couch. Is this just we kicked a guy while he was already falling out of power, or is the culture of Hollywood actually changing?
Well, I pay very close attention to everything happening, and I see the opposite happening. I've seen over the last couple of weeks many other women and men come forward sharing their very personal stories about similar experiences. There was this very well known Oscar nominated director whom recently over 190 women came forward and said he did all of these inappropriate things to me. There was a Hollywood talent agent, a man
Right.
who was very inappropriate towards his male clients and others in that world. And in a smaller scale, things like this have been happening as well, not just in Hollywood, but in other industries as well. I don't think this is a problem that is exclusive to show business.
It might not be
It might
exclusive.
not.
It's certainly amplified, even just because we're all watching it. I mean, this is an industry where the currency of the industry are people. When you cast or when you audition for a role, the product is you. So obviously, there's a natural intimacy where lines can be blurred. But you do. I mean, you pay as much attention to this place as anybody, probably much more. Is there another shoe that's going to drop? Are there other big players that are going to fall? Other big institutions like the Weinstein Company? Is this the end of this scandal, or is it only the beginning?
I definitely don't think it's the end of this scandal. I think that there will continue to be developments along the way. I mean, just today, there were reports that the Weinstein Company may have to file for bankruptcy. Reports which I should add they are denying. But there have been reports and accusations against Harvey Weinstein's brother. The Harvey specific story is one that won't be going away anytime
Mm-hmm.
soon. And the repercussions of that throughout show business, I think, will be continued to be felt for quite some time.
And I actually give you some credit for all of this. Obviously, you started doing this over 10 years ago, and you were the first big blogger and certainly the first big Hollywood blogger, but you really shone a light in a way that other tabloids didn't really do. I mean, you brought this kind of Hollywood scrutiny and microscope into the internet age, and obviously there's a lot of entertainment that goes along with that as well. Do you take any of the credit or any of the responsibility for ripping open the veil that covered Hollywood for so long?
Not at all. I would give credit first and foremost to Ashley Judd. She was the first major player to speak on the record, to be fearless enough to put herself, her reputation, and her career on the line in speaking to the New York Times because they had difficulty getting countless women to speak on the record, and she did, and she really let other women know it's okay to share your story.
Hmm. It's funny, you and I obviously probably have different political views, but when you look, we on the right, we conservatives, we always like to make fun of crazy Hollywood actors and actresses saying wild political activist statements. But then when you when you look at what some of these people have gone through in their professional lives, a lot of them since they were children, you get a little bit more empathy, I think, and you say, this is a pretty weird town and weird profession, and if it changes your mind and warps your vision of things, there but for the grace of God go I, possibly. Ashley Judd is an example because all of we conservatives made fun of her political statements for the last 2 years. My last question for you: what's the next shoe to drop? What is the next? Where is this going? Both the industry and obviously this particular issue of the sexual harassment and sexual assault.
Um, I think that it remains to be seen. I actually am a little bit pessimistic. I don't know how much of a change it will have, just because by nature there are bad people in this world.
Hmm.
And I do believe that this will continue to happen just because there are those that get a taste of power and let it get to their head, and they will abuse those underneath them. I mean, one of the other stories about Harvey Weinstein that also resonated to me wasn't that, in addition to him sexually harassing all these women, according to them, was that according to other women, he was such a bully that he would bully actresses allegedly to wear his wife, Georgina Chapman's clothes. She's a fashion designer. There will always be those bullies. There will always be those higher ups that will treat people beneath them awfully in show business, in politics, across the board.
Well, politics is
The
just show
thing
business for ugly people, as you know.
what? Give me that joke. I did it.
You're right about the bullying, and you see it with a lot of my friends who are working at production houses or working for big agencies or whatever. The stories you hear of like phones being thrown across the room and having to work 20 hours straight, and it is really vicious, and even more so than I think I've heard from my friends in other high pressure fields like finance or maybe politics is the only analog. Is it the is it the narcissism? Is it the vanity that comes along with show business and politics that makes these egos turn so monstrous?
No, I think it's the fact that for so long, so many people could get away with so much. So much was overlooked, so much was
Mm.
accepted. Oh, they just do that. That's been going on like that for forever. Whereas a more corporate environment, a more traditional workplace would not accept and tolerate behavior that is accepted and tolerated in show business or politics.
There is a permissiveness, that's true. You wouldn't get it in a lot of other industries where people are a little more grounded in I make a widget and I sell a widget and then people buy a widget. This where you're creating the inner life of characters, you're casting people to go from nothing to have the heights of glamour and fame and power. That is really corrupting, and it's hard to keep a rein on that. And it remains to be seen if Hollywood will be able to institute any kind of culture of accountability. I'm not very hopeful for it, but excellent analysis. Perez, thank you for being on. We've got to bring you back. You're like the expert on all of these issues.